This is the presentation, Modalized Normality in Pictorial Narratives at Sinn and Bedeutung 25. We're interested in the free perception variety of free indirect discourse. This is a construction where one clause or picture asserts that a character was looking, and the following clause or picture shows what the character sees. So in this example from a short story, I looked back up the sidewalk and that angry kid was walking towards me. It's understood that in a described situation, the first person character has just looked and seen an angry kid walking towards him. This is an example from comics, Tezuka's Ode to Kirohito. In the panel at the bottom left, the hero looks into a drawer, and the panel at the bottom right shows what he sees. It's a picture held in his hand. This is another example from comics from Simon Lea's Fluffy. The hero Michael has lost his rabbit Fluffy on a train. He goes searching for it and looks into a cabin, and in shock he sees a girl eating a rabbit sandwich. He's hallucinating. She wasn't really eating a sandwich, she was eating a pastry. So this is a non-veridical example where the eating the rabbit sandwich doesn't really happen in the base world of a described situation. It's what Michael thinks is happening. The free perception construction is also found in film. I'm going to show you a clip from The Third Man.
Gelitten unter Pontius Pilatus, gekreuzigt, gestorben und begraben, abgestiegen zur Hölle, am dritten Tage wieder auferstanden von den Toten, aufgefahren in den Himmel, sitze zur rechten Hand Gottes des allmächtigen Vaters, und dann, wenn kommen wird, zur...
At the end of the second shot, the man in the fur collar looks up, and the next shot, the third shot, is interpreted as showing what he sees. We're going to refer to a running example. Gable and Boyer are playing cards with an ordinary deck. In the panel on the left, Gable looks up, and the panel on the right shows what he sees. It's Boyer holding up an ace of spades. And this is supposed to be understood veridically. Boyer really did hold up an ace of spades. In the second version, in the panel on the left, Gable looks up, and the panel on the right shows what he hallucinates seeing. It's Boyer holding up a moon tarot card. This must be hallucinating. It must be non-veridical because they're playing with an ordinary deck of cards. We're going to refer to and then criticize an analysis of free perception from a paper from 3 years ago, The Formal Semantics of Free Perception in Pictorial Narratives. It's a straightforward Hintica analysis of embedding. The unusual part of it is that it uses event sequence models. Models are constructed by stipulating a finite set of event types. We want to say that there is an event type, EGA, which is the event type of Gable looking veridically at a scene that looks exactly like the picture at the bottom from Gable's geometric perspective. Event type means it's something that can occur in different possible worlds, or it can occur multiple times in one possible world. Event types have preconditions. The event EGA can happen only in a world W where Gable is facing a scene that looks exactly like the picture from his geometric perspective. If W satisfies this precondition, W has a successor world, which is W followed by the event EGA. Typically, W has other successors. This is a branching time modal space. Epistemic consequences of events are captured using epistemic alternative relations. Primitively, they are relations on event types rather than relations on worlds. For each agent, we stipulate a epistemic alternative relation on event types. And in this case, the set of event alternatives to event EGA for Gable is the unit set of EGA. This slide defines epistemic alternative relations at the level of worlds. Let W be a world that satisfies the preconditions of event EGA. That is, let W be a world where Gable is facing a scene that looks just like the picture. In this case, the world WEGA is defined. We define the epistemic alternatives for Gable in world WEGA as follows. The alternatives are worlds of the form VD, where number 1, world V is an epistemic alternative to W for Gable. Number 2, D is an event alternative to EGA for Gable, and there's only one possibility, D must be EGA. And number 3, world V satisfies the preconditions of D, that is, it satisfies the preconditions of EGA. Or V is a world where Gable is facing a scene just like the picture. The consequence of this is that epistemic alternatives for Gable in world WEGA are of the form VEGA. These are worlds where he has just looked at a scene like the second picture. This captures number 1, introspection. Gable knows he is looking. And number 2, veridicality, because the alternative V must satisfy the preconditions of EGA. This means it's a world where he is looking at a scene like the second picture, and because EGA is the last event, he looks at it. This is the LF of example 1. We're using a framework where pictorial narratives get enriched with discourse reference and certain operators. So what's going on here is that X introduces a discourse referent for Gable. X is just a point in the picture, or it's an area of the picture which sets up the discourse referent. Then the operator V1 is an operator which does a couple of things. So 1, after we've set up the discourse referent, is the index of the anaphoric center. And the operator V basically does 2 things. First, it adds the information that the center, that's Gable, has just looked. And second, it switches the viewpoint for the upcoming picture, that's the picture of Boyer with the ace, to the visual geometric viewpoint of Gable. This enforces basically 2 things. So we get the information that Gable has just looked, after the first picture, or in the first picture, and second, it fixes the geometric viewpoint for the Boyer picture. Then the semantics of pictorial narratives in general is going to give us the information that the world of a described situation looks like the second picture from Gable's perspective, because that's the general semantics of pictures in pictorial narratives. That completes the review of the analysis of the veridical example from the earlier paper. Now we want to point out a bug in the analysis. This syntax semantics interface and model construction entails that Gable picks up all of the information in his field of view in a described situation for the comic. This is incorrect as a description of human agents. When human agents look, the information they pick up is more like this. We get a gross, fuzzy, low acuity package of information about the whole field of view. That's the fuzzy image on the left. And second, our eyes dart about and focalize just a couple of places. So this is Boyer looking at Gable now, so focalizes Gable's face and focalizes his hand with the card, and that's it. We get no other information. In a typical perception event or sequence of perception of events, the viewer, that's Boyer, picks up very little information about Gable's left hand holding the chips. Boyer simply doesn't get the information that Gable is holding some chips in his left hand. The problem that was just described is problem 1. Naive application to pictorial free perception of Hinteke semantics for the information of agents has the agent, the one depicted as looking, gaining too much information in a described situation. Now let's look at the example involving hallucination or misperception. Gable looks up and he sees Boyer holding up a moon tarot card. A naive Hinteke analysis of misperception has Gable's information state after looking entailing the content of the second panel. All of Gable's world alternatives look like the panel from his geometric perspective. We're going to look at the mechanics of this in event sequence models in a moment. Here's a problem with this. If this example was veridical perception, Gable would normally not pick up all of the information available in his field of view. For instance, he might not pick up information about the precise configuration of the tie. Why should he pick up so much information, all of the information in the second picture, when looking non-veridically? A naive Hinteke analysis of misperception has the agent picking up far more information in non-veridical scenarios than in veridical ones, assuming problem 1 has been addressed. This is implausible. This is our problem 2. The next slides look at the analysis of non-veridical perception in event sequence models. First, we introduce an event type of veridically looking at a moon tarot card. So event type EGM is the event type of Gable veridically looking at a scene that looks exactly like the picture from his geometric perspective. Event EGM is not what happens in the base world in a described situation for the hallucinating scenario V2. Instead, EGM is what happens in Gable's alternatives in scenario V2. This slide defines a very specific misperception event. The event type EGAM is the event type of Gable facing a scene like the left picture with the ace of spades, while thinking he is looking at a scene like the right picture with the moon tarot card. The set of event alternatives for EGAM is the unit set of EGM. This models the epistemic effects of the event EGAM. The set of event alternatives for EGAM is the unit set of EGM, which is an event of veridically looking at a moon tarot card. This reflects the idea that Gable doesn't know he's hallucinating. It models the epistemic effects of the misperception event because in each of Gable's alternatives, he does look at a moon tarot card. In our framework, the logical form of non-veridical examples has to involve embedding. Here we see a logical form with a first extensional panel of Michael looking, and the second panel with the girl eating the rabbit sandwich is embedded under an implicit predicate P. So basically the rabbit sandwich picture is the complement of P, and P has the subject 1, which is the anaphoric center, which is Michael, who's shown in the first picture. The reason this has to be involved embedding is that if the second picture was not embedded, it would be interpreted extensionally, and by the general interpretation of pictorial narratives, a base world for the narrative would involve a girl eating a rabbit sandwich. This breaks down the interpretation of the logical form. D introduces a discourse referent for Michael. P is the implicit predicate, which has the semantics. A world of the form WE, where E is an event, satisfies the formula if and only if E is an event of the center, that's Michael looking, and every event alternative F to E for the center, and every alternative V to W for the center, where the complex VF is defined, is such that V looks like the embedded picture from the geometric perspective of the center. Roughly, the center does some perceptual action, every alternative to which is consistent with the picture. This has the agent picking up all of the information in the picture. Let's see why. Let's say Michael hallucinated the girl eating this rabbit sandwich while not hallucinating or paying attention to anything specific about the configuration of the window in back. This would mean that Michael has some alternatives where the girl is eating a rabbit sandwich, but the window is opened at a crack. So that's an alternative for Michael, but it's not an alternative consistent with the picture because the picture is not doesn't show the window open at a crack. In conclusion, a basic Hinticke analysis of misperception has the agent gaining too much information. It has the agent gaining all of the information in the embedded picture. This is our problem too. We're going to approach the problems by first solving problem 1. This is going to be kind of simple. We're going to add more events of normal looking in the model construction to fix problem 1. Second, we're going to apply this to alternatives instead of the base in the intentional construction in order to fix problem 2. This is the veridical logical form. We found that the semantics was roughly Gable faced a scene like the second picture and did a looking action that he could do while facing such a scene. We argued that this was problematic, and because it seemed to entail that Gable picked up all the information in the second picture. For instance, Gable saw the precise configuration of the tie. Now, this is problematic, but it really doesn't have to do with the LF or with the syntax semantics interface. It has to do with the model construction. We had a model construction which doesn't have enough events of Gable looking at a scene like that. The only event we had was one where Gable looked at that scene and picked up all the information in it. The event EGA, where Gable looks at the scene with the ace of spades and picks up all the information in the scene, this actually isn't a normal way for Gable to look. These are more normal ways for Gable to look. EGA1, Gable takes a low acuity view of the whole scene and then focalizes Boyer's face and focalizes the ace and doesn't pick up any other information. Or here's another normal way of looking. E.g. A2. Gable takes a low acuity view of the whole scene, then focalizes the ace, and then focalizes the tie. Maybe he's more interested in ties than faces. This is also a normal way of looking. In the scenario, it is understood that when Boyer holds up the ace, Gable would focalize it in any normal looking event. This is the source of the implication that Gable gets the information that an ace is held up. What looking events are normal depends on the scene, but it also depends on other aspects of the state. For instance, whether Gable is tired and whether he's more interested in ties than in cards. We're going to collapse such things into a predicate script n, where n e sigma o means that event e is something that could normally happen in state sigma given ordering source o. And here we're alluding to the premise semantics of Kratzer and Lewis as a way of formulating normality. This is the veridical semantics with a normality condition added. This logical form is true in world WE, where W is a world and E is an event, only if in world W, Gable faced a scene like the second picture, and he did a looking action E that he could normally do while facing such a scene. This is the natural interpretation of the pictorial narrative. We're not going to add the normality condition to the semantics of the operator V because normality implicatures are typical in narratives, so this is just an implicature. We don't have to say it's the semantics of the extensional narrative. This is the LF of the intentional version. Here we are going to include a normality condition in the semantics of the operator P, which is the embedding operator. The semantics is going to be roughly, Gable did a perceptual action, the alternatives to which are ones that he could normally do when facing a scene like the second picture. This doesn't entail Gable getting all the information in the second picture because in such a situation, Gable can normally look without getting all of the information in his field of view. This is some notation we're going to use in the formalization. V is an information state. It's a world plus discourse referent values, crucially a value for the center. P is a picture, and P in semantic value brackets is a viewpoint-centered pictorial content. And V, world V incremented by the content of P is V restricted by the state of information that the center is facing a scene like picture P. Proper formulation of this requires using guarded string models rather than simple event sequence models, and that's developed in the paper Campbell and Rooth, Epistemic Semantics in Guarded String Models. With this, we formulate the intentional semantics as follows. We have a logical form, and we want to check whether it's true in the world WE, where W is a world and E is a looking event by Gable. And it's true only if, for every alternative world V to W, and every alternative event F to E, such that VF is defined, V incremented with the content of P2 followed by F is also defined, and F is an action that the center, namely Gable, could normally do in a situation where he's facing a scene like the second picture. Summary. For this embedding construction to be true, Instead of Gable doing a looking action, the alternatives to which entail the complete perception of the second picture, Gable does an action, the alternatives to which entail the normal perception of the second picture. This is easier to satisfy than the first version. Gable does not have to hallucinate the specific configuration of the tie, though normally he would hallucinate the specific configuration of the card, namely, what card is held up.